Okay, cool. I'm gonna get this set up and then we're gonna get stuff started right away. But first, just need to double check a few things. Okay, cool. Good to go there. So I'm gonna play to you another clip here. We are at the finale at part 7, which I'm really excited to actually finish up the story to, which means I got a lot of work I need to do before I start getting more progress on the second story. So what I'm going to do first is that I'm going to play a clip here, or a video, which is about 4 minutes and 9 seconds long. Something of a great inspiration that I always meant so much to me that kind of got me through more to doing what I do. So that being said, let's go ahead and play The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, The Ecstasy of Gold as our introduction here. Playing. What an amazing scene. Even if it's just for a character to run around in a graveyard. Let me do something a little bit different here. I guess since we're on a finale, I might as well. So I might as well just put this at an angle because you know what? This is actually a finale of the story, by the way. So for any of those who weren't here for the previous part, what we actually had gone over is the fact that obviously the character Lobo has gone through some changes. But before we get into the story, I'm going to actually kind of tell a little bit of the significance with that scene. Basically, the character who's basically the significance of the ugly, which in the story of the good, bad, and the ugly, that journey was supposedly because the good and the ugly, or Blondie and Tuco, these two characters, formed this very bizarre partnership with each other. And that partnership eventually had to at least come to some sort of area because, again, these two characters in some way despised each other. Because Tuco, he was greedy, but the good guy, pretty much played by Clint Eastwood, traveled together through all of this peril between the battles of the Civil War and all of these other obstacles that play along together to find this treasure of gold that was $200,000 worth. But going through so much of that, when they finally reached that destination, the ecstasy of gold, pretty much in that standard, shows that desire. It shows a way of a character hungering for that end goal. And so the end goal of that is a little bit more differentiated here from the story that I'm going to read off. So basically, to recap, okay, Monkey, I am so sorry, but you need to get down because I need to read. And the last time I had to put you down, you basically put like a scratch through me. I thought I had to go get medication for it. Let's see. So basically where we left off, and you were welcome, by the way. No worry, we hand sanitize our hands at work, so we're pretty much good on that part. And not to mention about Lysol and all that and supplies. Not that I'm really kind of like freaking out, but I can understand the issue with that. So where we kind of kicked off from is the fact that after Lobo himself had finally made it back to the western parts of Western Texas, essentially he basically found closure to his life completely because he found out who his mother and his father was. However, though, he did find it mysterious that when he got his medical records of him and his father, his medical records of his mother were completely gone. They vanished. So the problem with this is that it's mysterious because out of all the people, he knows where he comes from. He knows the people that his parents are, but he doesn't know exactly why that file is missing. And basically being that they also went into the town of North Arving from where he originated from, it turns out that Jackie happens to be one of the new deputies of the town of Arving. So basically after his return and reunites with Lobo, eventually he takes him to North Arving and he basically meets up. But before he meets up with the sheriffs and all that to have this discussion about where he stands between the law and outlaw, Jackie decides to now take Faithful Doe, Swiftful Falcon, and Lobo himself to his cemetery. And that cemetery happens to be where the two headstones of his mother and father finally are. And this brings full closure to his life because now, as he's weeping and mourning for the loss of his mother and father, this metaphorically breaks an entire chain that surrounds his life because his life now comes full circle. And now he realizes he needs to finally bring justice to the town of El Marico and the town of Silver Rock. So they finally make it back. So basically, the sheriff, who's basically Jackie's boss, confronts Lobo about his past, but is willing to forgive and pardon his crimes if he would help take down the Silver Rock gang, or pretty much the remaining gang that Massacre himself leads. And so basically they go to El Marico. And before the showdown in El Marico goes off between these hoodlums, Lobo decides to pay one last visit to a certain grave that was actually by the river, which is of Fenrir and Amelia. So he decides to pay his respects one last time before engaging into a showdown. And basically this comes to a confrontation with Hound. Hound being technically another member of the gang. However, though, it is now revealed from the story that Hound himself is not a bad guy. He basically warns Han Burton or Lobo about the traps that were set above. There were snipers on the roof. So basically, Hound was, in a way, antagonizing Han Burton but in the sense of actually trying to warn him to make sure that he knows what was going on. So basically a battle ensues, chaos ensues, basically bullets fly everywhere, people die, lots of outlaws and deputies die. Jackie still lives, but it comes at a price that the sheriff of North Irving, or basically Jackie's boss, ends up paying in blood and pretty much succumbs to death and peril. And Jackie decides to take his vengeance out on all of the wrongdoers. Now, basically, there was also a confrontation with Vulture as well, and Vulture decides to pretty much disgustingly and attempts to violate Faithful Doe in front of Han Burton, which this basically enrages Han, and he gets into a fist fight with Vulture during the whole gun battle. But eventually, it comes to a point where there was a distraction from the outlaws, where Vulture escapes, and we no longer hear from him for that, which I'm going to basically say we don't really hear from Vulture throughout the rest of the story. I'll explain here once we get done. But now it comes to a point that basically the sheriff being dead, Jackie, the deputies, the vigilantes, and some volunteers, along with Han Burton, Swift Falcon, Faithful Doe, and Hound himself, pretty much liberated the town of El Marico. However, though, being that the town of El Marico was liberated, Han Burton decides to pay Phyllis True, the guy that he strong-armed, to paying massacre money. He decides to pay him a visit, and he basically pours out everything that he feels like he's done wrong to the person, despite his two children having the urge to kill him. He basically lays out that he deserves to die and he deserves to suffer for what he did, and he decides to give him the rest of his money that to his children and to him, not to absolve himself from any of the pain that he caused. He wasn't looking for absolution in that case, but he was looking to better himself by giving his family a better life for what he had done. And so finally, after doing this, he finally gets a bit of the closure and the forgiveness from Phyllis True and his two children. That being said, he now realizes the final step of what he has to do is to go back to not El Marico, but to Silver Rock, and to finish off Massacre. So now we are going to kick back off with this part of the story here. Okay. So I'm going to actually start off right after he basically gets out of Phyllis True's house. A moment after all these years had finally come full circle. But now as I left, I now know what I have to delve deeper into the abyss of hell itself and Massacre's corrupt utopia. That was the town of Silver Rock. I rode on my horse like a bat out of hell till I had reached a point where I could smell the stench of the gloomy town. The town itself was crawling with so many of Massacre's dim-witted goons. But luck happened to be more on my side, as I knew almost every inch of his shithole paradise he surrounded himself in. I snuck past all of his patrols until I had made it into the spiraling hill, and finally into Massacre's mansion. It only seemed like yesterday I was here, minus the fact that there were no longer any tents outside of his stronghold. In the distance of Silver Rock, there were more buildings made to house his men. Secretly, and with no eyes on me, I climbed up to the second floor of his mansion by climbing into some stacks of crates that were against the wall, and finally, I was inside of the hall, just a few feet from his office. I kicked open the door without any caution or without any safety precautions anymore. But he wasn't presently inside, or let alone into the mansion at all. I began to ransack his office, looking through every cabinet and every drawer, and through his chest, to which I found a bandolier. Basically, a bandolier, which bullets you can put on top, and a satchel and a box full of bullets for my pistol. I loaded my gun in the punches of the bandolier and wired it around me while taking the satchel. But then I saw a portrait of a loathsome massacre on the wall. I yanked the portrait off the wall where the frames broke and the glass shattered into shards and pieces. And that's where I discovered a gap that contained a document file. And in this document file was the medical records of my mother. Yes, it answered a big question, but not all of it. It's as I suspected. He had the medical file, but why did he have it? And why did he keep it? What was he doing with it? More questions filled my mind, but they would have to be answered by Massacre himself. But it was finally time to burn every single burden, sin, labor, abuse, manipulation, and corruption permanently to the ground. Just outside of Massacre's chambers was a jug of moonshine that was more than enough to finish what I had started. I grabbed the jug and started pouring from his office, and then all the way down to the bottom of the main floor, where me and the old gang used to lounge. And just before I acted, I placed my mother's document in the satchel and wore it underneath my bandolier. Just before I kicked open the door to the massacre's personal harem, I roared as I stormed in. Get on out of here, ladies. Your days of massacres horrors are over. Or your days of whoring are now finally over. I fired one shot through the window, which caused him to scream and run frightened out. With them all out of his palace, I slowly walked out from the front door, and as the skilled gunslinger I was, I twisted my pistol and fired one bullet into the moonshine stain on the bottom of the floor, that little fire that spread to the top of the floor. The woman's screams down the spiral sent dozens of massacre's men to run directly at me with their guns, but I killed them off easier than I had practiced before, since I knew how to fire a gun since I was an outlaw. One by one I killed, but I killed them as a man seeking to rid evil rather than naively serve it. I killed these bandits and scum under my own free will, in the name of good and the name of redemption. I was the angel sent down by God to smite the evil that had corrupted the lands in ceaseless darkness. I no longer lived in fear or the guilt that I had finally triumphed above, and became better than the sins of my past. I wasn't afraid of massacre anymore. I was already knee-deep in corpses of criminals as Massacre's mansion was up in flames. I kept an appropriate pace while walking down the spiral hill and finally into Silver Rock, where the citizens of Gloom and the uncivilized, along with the corrupted officers, had suddenly feared me. For I, Lobo, the righteous gunslinger, had returned to exact righteous reckoning, and the justice by power of my pistol. I called out, demanding, Massacre! Again I called out, Massacre! Come out and face me. I stood still, glaring down until I saw a group of men walk out of the old crusty and webbed saloon, and behind the men who marched and took position in front of the wax puppet master himself. Massacre had flared back and felt intense outrage when he saw his palace covered in flames. Lobo, you are the biggest mistake of my life. I took you in and made you a dangerous man. People feared you and gave you everything you wanted. Yet you throw it away and became a man of morals, he bitterly remarked. No matter what good you do, Lobo, or the life changes you have, you will always be a monster throughout the rest of your life. You let others down and a woman die. Your only true purpose in life was to be used and thrown away. Now tell me, son, how does it feel to be a pathetic wretch who threw his own life away? I felt no fear coursing through me anymore, like I had from him all these years. It was all numbed away, and he had already taken everything from me from before, but I wouldn't let him succeed again. That's where you're wrong, you yellow-bellied coward. You couldn't face me like a man, so you and Vulture send your men up to South Dakota to do your dirty work for you? Yet I still stand with nearly most of your men dead in the dirt. My purpose of life hasn't been much clearer than before. My purpose is that I was better than you. He viciously laughed as his gang laughed along with him. My, oh my, Lobo, you are as pathetic as they come. You know, the strange thing that is bizarre is that I named you after a Lobo for being... that I believe that those kind of wolves were indeed cowards. I was once known as the Black Wolf. It was just like my nightmare had warned me about, and now there was no denying it. But again I closed my eyes and heard the soft chimes and the cry of the Lobo echo through me again. I don't fear you anymore, Massacre. The Reaper has finally called for you as well. You need to pay for all the crimes you committed. Why, you goddamn ungrateful turncoat. Who do you think you are coming back destroying my home and telling me what to do? Hope you're ready to meet the devil himself, because you're about to meet him face to face. I held a firm expression on my face as I smirked at his remark. What's so goddamn funny to you, Lobo? I chuckled, then replied, I already met the devil, and you want to know what he told me? He's not interested in me, but he just wants you. The Reaper himself is calling for you, Massacre. So before we settle this bloody battle, I have one last question. Why did you have my mother's medical file? Massacre had laughed his last laugh, as this was his most maniacal and psychotic reaction to compare. So you finally want to know. Okay, Lobo, here's the truth. As you obviously know, I indeed did kill your mother and father. My sister obviously watched and enjoyed every moment, but before I killed your mother, I took my time and had some personal fun with her. That's right, boy. I raped her in front of your father's corpse and enjoyed every moment of it. I honestly wish she was still alive because I did fancy her. But I was indeed curious, so I went to North Oving, and as a long shot raided to the hospital nearby, and I found that file of your mother. Now, why did I take it? Because I wanted to keep a photographic image of her in my mind, since I did fancy her a lot, and I could take pleasure in that memory. So there's the truth that I raped her, killed her, and pleasured myself to an image of her. But enough story time. I think it's finally the time that I finish the job and ridding you of your worthless existence. Boys, kill this useless orphan. They all drew out guns, but my pistol was wielded out and shot all 6 of his men directly in the head and loaded my gun back up with 1 bullet as I stared Massacre in the eyes, unshaken or unintimidated by him. He was the true coward of the West. He stepped forward and placed I stepped forward and placed my pistol in my holster as we were about to have a pistol duel, man to man. It was just down between me and him. The tension was severe and potent between us as arch enemies. He was nervous and frustrated, and I was fierce inside, but calm for what I had remembered. I was not to give in to hatred or to be consumed like Massacre manipulated me to be. He kept twitching his hand as the sweat increasingly poured down from his face. But I stood still with my hands facing down, not moving or flinching an inch. Then, for the last time, I closed my eyes and heard the small chimes. And then the cry of the Lobo once again. Massacre arrogantly tried to take advantage and drew out his pistol at the speed of the god's blink. But I drew my pistol out at the moment I opened my eyes and shot his hand. The hot pain of my bullet pierced through the flesh of his hand, causing him to drop his black pistol that had gold engravings on them. But as I said, Massacre was the true coward. For as I slowly approached him, his corrupt officers attempted to draw fire on me. But by saving grace, Jackie, Faithful Doe, Hound, and Swift Falcon were my guardian angels and killed the corrupted officers, and I picked up his black pistol. But Massacre created a diversion by shooting another pistol, causing us to duck for cover, and he made a run for it on his horse. But me and Jackie got on ours, and I placed my satchel with my mother's file with mine, and my father's in the pouch on the side of my horse, and immediately we both chased after him. A firefly and Lobo chasing after a black wolf. How the hunter had become the hunted himself. He fired off rounds to keep us back, then jumped off the horse just before he had a chance to aim and kept us running from behind every rock that he could spot as we chased him. Up a rocky hill that led to high ground until the very last step he took was at a dead end on the side of a cliff, which drew ground that was a long way down. But at last, me and Jackie had reached Massacre, the coward who had nowhere else to go and nowhere else to hide behind. You cock-sucking orphans will always be lower-class filth. You will both die a horrendous death, and your loved ones will be perished, raped, and violated before they die too. Lobo, I always hated you, and I don't regret anything I did to your mother and father, and you, Firefly, were always the weakest link in the gang. You're nothing without me. I could have given you everything. Everything? I asked. Everything? Massacre bitterly outbursted. I looked at Jackie, and he looked at me, and we shared the same feeling. I threw my pistol to the ground and pulled Massacre's black pistol from my holster. At the exact same moment, Jackie pulled his gun out, and we had both unloaded every round from our chambers and shot Massacre to death just before he fell off the cliff, where we heard his yell or his final scream. I looked over the cliff and calmly spoke my last words to his corpse. I want my mother and father back, you goddamn coward. And like both me and Jackie took a moment's silence and looked out over the hill to see the quiet view of the wilderness. But like I felt in the north areas up to South Dakota, I could breathe freely down here. I closed my eyes, but this time I couldn't hear the sound of the chimes of the howling of the wolf. This time it had faded away as it slowly closed the chapter, as all I heard was the soft blow of the wind. Every weight had truly been lifted, and every curse broken. But there was still one monster left, and one demon left to slay. Vulture was still out there, and eventually I would catch up to him, that salacious son of a bitch. But for the moments here, we had finally done it. We had liberated El Marico, Silver Rock, and the western lands of Texas from the grip of the outlaw king of bandits and criminals. We returned back and attended to the dead in the woods of El Marico. Things in all directions of all people's lives began to flourish once again as months had gone by. Jackie had become the new sheriff of El Marico. Swell Falcon had returned to his people and finally proved his worth to become the next leader to his tribe, and even Faithful Doe returned for a few months to spend time with her father and her own people. Hound left the outlaw life and stayed in El Marico and became the new mayor, with Mr. True's son as one of the counselors. As for me, who convinced Faithful Doe to spend time with her family, I stayed behind El Marico for a few days, until I got word on Vulture's whereabouts, and soon enough the word got back to me. A messenger on a horse rode into town, requesting me as he delivered a note that informed me of Vulture and where he was hiding. It said, "Mr. Burton, stop. If you receive this letter, stop. The location of the man you seek, stop. He is taking refuge and work in a plantation to the east." Ooh. I actually do like what you actually said about that, Orlander. The location of the man you seek, stop. He is taking refuge and work in a plantation. Keep that in mind, by the way, even though the story's over, because that's a clue here. To the east in the state of Georgia, stop. He is working for slavers, so I advise caution. Stop. Inside this bag is some supplies to help you get to him. Stop. I looked inside of the bag, and it had documents on my face with the fake alias under the name of Roscoe Hartford, which was to be my alias. I was set and ready for a new journey to begin. Faithful Doe knew I had been on the other side of the country, and I'd be back with her again. But this journey was something I had to do alone. I no longer had my pistol, as I now had massacres in my very own possession. I knew this was the gun he killed my mother and father with. He used it as an instrument of destroying lives, and now I am using his pistol as an instrument of justice. I visited Jackie and Hound one last time before I left Texas. Han, brother, I will definitely miss you. Just know, if you need anything, I will always be here whenever you come back. I love you, brother. I love you too as well, little brother, I spoke. I shook Hound's hand and congratulated him on his success. I'm proud of you, Hound. Keep this town flourishing and alive. Thank you as well, Lobo. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Burton. I smiled and nodded as I hopped on my horse and rode off into the distance to the east, just awaiting the new challenges and the sights that lay out on the other side, and the dangers that would come with it. It was the last mysterious moment that came to this point as I rode. Okay, guys, this is actually one of my next favorite parts of the story, because this is something that I'm going to introduce eventually. But listen to this part, because there's only 2 pages left. Listen to this part very carefully, because this is where stuff's a tad bit supernatural. It was the last mysterious moment that came to this point as I rode with fast speed on my horse. For as I rode, something strange was happening. Some strange force was riding in the wind. It was exactly as my horse had galloped through, that it was like a force or some kind of spirit, too, that had rode on a horse, that galloped through me. But it was like time had immediately slowed down as we both rode into each other. And in the force of figure itself had looked back at me, as if I've seen this person before. It was as if the past and the future had collided, that slowed all of time down. I turned my head while my horse was continuing on, as I was stunned by this unknown revelation that had passed. I suddenly stopped the horse and looked back to see puffs of dirt flowing towards me. But what appeared to be a spirit of the rider had disappeared. I looked down the path to such a mysterious event, but no answer could be given. So I continued on and galloped, thinking about who or what I'd been riding through, or what had even happened to that figure. But little did I know that was the figure of someone who I would eventually meet that one day. And that, my friends, is the end. So basically, we end it right here on this particular page. So what was so cool about this? First of all, I want to express how happy I am to finally finish the story. So to pretty much recap what happened here is that Han Burton finally faced his inner demons. He finally faced off against Massacre by also burning down the palace himself. The palace that was built on top of a cemetery, by the way. Basically, he burned it to the ground. He finally faced Massacre. He finally found his mother's document, which was in the possession of Massacre. And Massacre held on to this document for very sick reasons. And so by finally confronting Massacre, he no longer felt afraid. But what was the shocking revelation to this is that Massacre himself revealed himself as the Black Wolf. He was originally known as the Black Wolf. So I guess eventually that's up to interpretation to people, which I'm not going to reveal exactly where he got the name. I will leave that to interpretation because I like to poke fun with that. But so it finally comes to the point where Han Burton kills the last of his men, and he basically shoots at his hand, and he drops his black and gold gun that he killed his mother and father with. And he rides off at the saving grace of Faithful Doe, Swift Falcon, Jackie, and Hound. So by that, Han picks up the gun that Massacre killed his mother and father with, and basically puts everything that he owns as he sees Massacre ride off away. So Jackie and Han Burton chase after Massacre. They chase him up to this tall, rocky mountain area, and they finally catch him off to a dead-end cliff, and they finally confront Massacre for the last time. And basically, they both kill Massacre, not out of hatred, not out of vengeance, but basically, it's what they had to do. If they didn't kill Massacre, he would definitely come back, and he would try to hunt them all. Because in some way, Massacre still has power and money, despite that. I mean, I could have revealed a little bit more for that one, but with Massacre finally dead, the town of El Marico, which I will give the Silver Rock town in interpretation as well, too, because I did not reveal the fate of Silver Rock. Only the mansion itself burned down. But El Marico, North Arving, and all the other places finally flourish. Hound, who was a former outlaw, who was the former gang member of Dust Devil's crew and also a former member of Massacre's crew, basically now is the mayor of El Marico. Jackie finally becomes the deputy of North Arving. North Arving or El Marico. I might have mixed those two up. I'm sorry. Basically, Faithful Doe temporarily visits her family up in South Dakota along with Swift Falcon. And Han Burton decides to finally take the time to finally hunt down Vulture. Now, Vulture in mind is the only antagonist in this story that has escaped. So keep this in mind here. Vulture himself is the only one who escaped. The bad guy. And now Han Burton is now finally, determined to track and kill Vulture down. And finally rid himself of everything. I mean, pretty much he's already rid himself of all the demons, but feels like he needs to finally track down and hunt down Vulture before he causes any more damage or to hurt to any other people, given his, his criminal lifestyle. So basically now he finally gets a message from a person who tells him of where Vulture's whereabouts is, and it's on a plantation. This is basically the key thing right here. The plantation of Georgia is where the second story will be written. Now, I'm not going to reveal too much here, but I'm going to actually reveal the ending right here, because this is what I feel like is going to tie into the second story. Was this particular ending that had technically you could say a supernatural, element to it, but again, I don't want to make it completely supernatural, but this is pretty much up to interpretation as well, because as Han Burton is riding on his horse out of Texas into basically trying to make his way to Georgia, a ghost-like phantom figure is also riding on a horse in the actual opposite direction, and these two collide. Now they don't like collide as they crash into each other. I mean, like they actually like literally ride into each other as if the past and the future itself, keywords, past and future, coincide. So basically, two figures ride into each other and they both go opposite ways. The Phantom figure looks over, and then Lobo himself, or Han Burton, looks over and he's like, who is that? I think I've seen that person before. But into that part of the story, it was shown, or basically what I had wrote was that little did I know it was the face of a person who I would one day meet. I want you guys to think about that particular line very carefully, that very ending. Yeah, just like Eureka. Oh my gosh. Because I want you to think about that particular line very carefully, because this second story, Han Burton is definitely going to come back. But here is the one thing that I will tell you. He will not be the main character. So I want to just tell that's the only thing I'm going to reveal, is that Han Burton will not be the main character. He will be a derogonist like Jackie was to Han Burton. Han Burton will be a derogonist in this next story. That's the only thing I'm going to reveal. And obviously the only thing that's basically also revealed is that Vulture himself, there we go, I'm going to reveal that. Vulture himself will definitely return. Han Burton will definitely return. But that's all I'm going to reveal. So I want to thank you guys for coming out. I know this stream was only about 37 minutes long, but like, do you guys have any questions or anything like this regarding the story? And since the story is now done, I'm actually going to try to work on the thumbnails for the streams, and I will try to actually see if I can link the story, the revised and re-edited version, to these streams, because again, I only read off the sloppy copy. That's what I like to call it. But like, if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know, and then I would be more than happy to answer. Because I'm probably going to end the stream off, but like in the sense of like, I'm happy that we finally got this, to a close. While I'm doing that, I'm going to close the door real quick so that way there's no noise coming through. Thank you, Professor Winter. I'm going to give it about a few minutes just in case if people do have questions, and then I'll end it off. But I'm happy because finally I finally get to tell a story, and I finally did. And it's a story that I'm proud of writing, because technically this story I thought of this story for over 5 to 6 years, and finally I got it written down with some changes and some liberties, but I finally got the story written out, and I'm proud of it. Yeah, there's some words I probably had to alter in that, because again, I kind of felt like it was a little bit off, but I loved it. I fell in love with it. Though I will say that the next story that I'm going to write is a bit, it's obviously controversial, just like the first one here, but in terms of the plantation, slavery, all of that stuff, of course, I'll probably put in like a warning notice, because it's probably going to have like other foul language into that. But I'm going to try to get some artwork done for this. I'm trying to get a book cover for it. I'm just so happy. So anyways, I still got about 4 minutes left before I end the stream off. So if you guys have any questions, like I said, feel free to let me know, and I would be more than happy to answer them. I just try to finish up a note real quick. Okay. Maybe what I could do to end off on a note here. What was that clip? think I got it. I think how I'm going to end off is going to be like with this. So I'm going to show you guys one more clip from Red Dead Redemption, by the way. I think this is something else that kind of inspired that in a sense.
Doing? I gotta go have a little chat before I get much.
Let's skip ahead here a bit.
You're headed back there, Arthur. Take this. I don't need it anymore.
What's that?
Here we go.
That you was. Get out of here.
I think this is going to be the perfect way to end it off.
Many miles we walk, the many things we learn, the building of the shrine, only just to run. That's the way it is. That's the way it is.
There's a good man within you. But he is wrestling with a giant.
Really sorry for your son. It's a hell of a thing. Our time is pretty much past. Leave with me at your back. Good fortune teach your hand. May the cards lay out a string. All from your command. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. We already owe more than it's worth. I just don't want any more folks to die, Dutch. Thank you, Bella. You know, there ain't enough kindness in this world, that's for sure.
Maybe it's a sign, Arthur. Try to do the good thing.
All right. So that is where I'm going to pretty much end it off right there. But, like, you can see the way that the main protagonist of Red Dead Redemption is pretty much writing. But, like, it's kind of like that particular moment where the scene itself brightens and then it slows down at the way he's writing. But, like, I imagine that particular scene, but where, like there's a big shot and then two different figures, a ghost and a man, collide, and that's where that slow moment I imagine appeared. And I figured that was the best way to end off because I felt like it's mysterious, but yet it kind of tells you something. It kind of symbolizes something. The past and the future. I'll let you guys think about that. So anyways, guys, I'm going to end this stream off. I'm happy. I'm going to go downstairs, get some food, and I'm going to try to write down some notes for the next story because I really do like, I'm in love with the first story that I wrote. Now I need to actually make this a little bit more of a story that I can, connect to, try to actually have something of this because I think this next one, yeah, it's gonna actually. I feel like it should have some more emotional moments, but I want it to be a little bit more grittier in a sense. But like I said, it's because I have 3 installments planned for this. This is the first one, and then the second one I'm working on is going to be that, and the third one is pretty much to wrap the entire things. And I'm really kind of it's just like I just don't know what to do. But like I got to start from the beginning of it, and then work my way up towards it, and then we will try to do something. So thank you guys for taking the time to do this. I'm going to take my time to try to get this stuff worked together. Try to get some thumbnail made for all these streams. If you want to go back and watch it and hear it, feel free. I leave that to you. That's your decision. Like I said, I will try to see if I can get the link for that particular file onto these streams as well once I get that chance, which I do have it. It's right here. But anyways, thank you guys for coming out. You guys have a wonderful night, and stay safe out there. Rock on.